All right, Ledesma, I'm here to talk to you today about a little lesson having to do with the customary system of measurement. And today we're going to specifically be talking about length. Okay, so length. Now, first of all, there are some basic units or conversions that you need to know for customary length. 12 inches equals 1 foot. That is certainly an important one. 36 inches equals 1 yard, and 12 times 3 is 36, so therefore 3 feet equals 1 yard right there. So these three you definitely need to know and memorize. Over here, some more complex ones. 1,760 yards is a mile, and 5,280 feet is a mile. And if you think to yourself, well, those measurements are not intuitive and it's hard to remember. Well, part of that is the reason that humans came up with the metric system. But this is the customary system today. So those are the units you need to know. All right. So we start out with a little number line, such as a ruler. Now, obviously, this is not drawn to scale. I made it bigger so that you can see it. But I have 0 inches all the way up to 1 inch. And of course, halfway between those two is a half of an inch. Okay. And so what I want to do here is I want you to now take a look at what we can do with this, right? So you use fractions to split up inches, right? So you have a half inch across here and 1 inch. But what if you have something smaller? You can end up with 1/4 of an inch, right? And that would, of course, make the half inch 2/4 of an inch. And then you could end up with 3/4 of an inch. So it's a good way to practice fractions. And remember that 1/2 is equivalent to 2/4. And 1 inch, of course, would end up being 4/4. Okay, so that's one way to look at it. The next thing we're going to do is go ahead and move down. What if you have something even smaller, right? So you could end up with 1/8 of an inch, something very small, right? You could go to 2/8 right here, which is equivalent to 1/4, right? You have to remember, oops, you have to remember your equivalent fractions. You could have 3/8 of an inch, right? You could have half of an inch, which is 4/8, right? Equivalent fractions right there. Okay, you can end up with 5/8 of an inch. Okay, you can have 3/4, which is 6/8 of an inch. Okay, and you can have 7/8 of an inch. So when things get much smaller, and then of course 1 inch equals 8/8 of an inch. So when things get much smaller, you can use fractions to measure things in the customary system, right? And last but not least, if something is very small, you might get down as low as 1/16 of an inch, right? And then you get 1/8, which is 2/16 of an inch, and you will see things measured this small. You can end up with 3/16 of an inch, okay? And you can end up with 4/16 of an inch, which is, of course, equivalent to 1/4, right? You can end up with 5/16, 5/16. You can end up with 6/16, okay? And you can see the pattern here, right? This is going to be 7/16, okay? Um, 1/2 is, of course, an equivalent fraction to 8/16, right? So if you're measuring things to the nearest 16th of an inch, and you'll find it on a ruler that it ends up being the smallest of the numbers is the 16th, okay? 5/8 is 10/16 right here, okay? And you get all the way across. You go 11/16, right? And you end up with 12/16, which is equivalent to 3/4. And if you know your equivalent fractions, you can do times 4 to get that, right? You get 13/16 here. 14/16 is equivalent to 7/8, and 15/16 right here, and then you get all the way to 16/16, which is 1 inch. And of course, that applies afterward too. So you can get 1 and 1/16, 1 and 2/16, which is 1 and an eighth, right? So that's how the customary system of measurement works and how you can practice fractions on a ruler. Okay, let's practice converting a few units of measurement. All right, so here we're changing a unit of measurement from a larger unit like feet into a smaller unit like inches. And we need to then multiply because you're going to need more of that smaller unit to end up with the larger unit. So 6 feet equals how many inches? Well, 12 inches equals 1 foot, so you're going to do 6 times 12. right? And you will get a 72 right there. 8 yards is how many feet? Well, 3 feet equal 1 yard. So you're going to have an 8 times a 3, and you're going to get 24 feet for 8 yards, okay? 3.5 feet. Now that's a little trickier, and you're trying to figure out how many inches it is. Well, I would break this up with the distributive property and say, okay, I've got 3 times 12, which gets me 36, and I've got 1/2 times 12, right? 1/2 times 12, right? Because 12 inches equals a foot, right? So in this case, I get 36 plus another 6, and I get 42 inches right there. For 10 1/3 yards, and you want to know how many feet that is? Well, that is very simple for you. Okay. If you want 10 1/3 yards and you want to know how many feet that is, okay, break it up with the distributive property again. 3 feet equals 1 yard. So you're going to do, okay, 10 times 3, and you're going to do 1/3. 1/3 times 3, right? And that's the idea here. Okay, so you get 30, and 1/3 of 3 is 1, so you're going to get 31 feet for that. Okay, moving on to the next part. And now, if you're changing a smaller unit, such as feet, into a larger unit like yards, you need to divide because you need less of the larger unit, right? So you're going to use division this time, right? So that's the idea here. So 9 feet equals how many yards? Well, you're going to take, and you know that 3 feet equals 1 yard, so you're going to do a 9 divided by 3, and you're going to get 9 feet equals 3 yards. And I'll think I'll start using a slash to do the division mark because it's hard to do with this drawing tool. 48 inches equals how many feet? Well, you know that 12 inches equals 1 foot, and I need fewer feet. Okay, so I'm going to say my 48, and I'm going to divide it by 12, just like a fraction there, and you end up with 4 feet. Okay, 50 inches equals how many feet? Now, this one's a little more complex. We just did 48 divided by 12, and you get 4. So 50 divided by 12 is going to be 4, but you've got 2 left over, right? You've got a remainder of 2. So you can do 4 and 2 twelfths. And you could even simplify that to 4 and 1/6 if you wanted to. Or another way to write your answer here would be 4 feet and 2 inches. Okay, so that would be another way to write that particular answer. And again, what we did was 50 divided by 12 right here. Okay, and one more time, 11 feet equals how many yards? Well, we know that 9 feet divided by 3 was 3 yards, and that would leave us with 2 left over, right? So we do 11 and divide it by 3, and what we would get is 3 remainder 2. So we would get 3 and 2/3 of a yard. Another way to write that would be 3 yards. Let me try and erase that. You would get 3 yards and 2 feet, right? So 3 yards and 2 feet. So 3 yards and 2 feet. So when it doesn't divide out evenly, that's how you account for it. So I hope you learned quite a bit about this, and I hope you have a great day. Keep practicing. That's the main thing, and we'll see you next time.